So this is going to be my video specifically talking about solving for an inequality before graphing it. Sometimes we don't have y equals mx plus b. So how do we get y equals mx plus b? We're always going to get the y by itself. And if you look over on the right side here, this is the other thing we're going to have to worry about. That if we multiply or divide by a negative, we're going to flip the inequality. What does that mean? That means if it's this way, we're going to change it to go that way. If it's going this way, we're going to change it to go that way. You never mess with the line underneath, you just flip it if you multiply or divide by a negative. So at this first one, y is not by itself. It has this minus 5 here. We're just going to continue to balance by doing the opposite of a negative 5 to both sides. Keep my y, keep everything else the same. I can only add to another like term, so I'm just going to make that into a 7. And then I would be able to graph from here. So think about, what would you do here? What is the 4 doing with the y, and how would you get rid of that? So since it is multiplying, we would just divide out. When you divide or multiply, we got to do it to everything, not just one. So now, I'm going to have 3 over 4x, but 8 divided by 4 turns into a 2. Down here in the bottom left, I've got a negative 3y, so instead of dividing by 4 like this one here, I'm going to divide by negative 3 to everything. And that means I'm going to have to pay attention to signs. Since I divided by a negative, I got to flip here. And then, I like to write my negative on top, but if you want to leave it on the bottom, that's fine. Opposite signs when dividing here, always a negative. The most difficult thing you might see is something like this last one in the bottom right, where you got to move 2 things. I want to get that y by itself, so I got to get rid of this 6x and this negative 2. So I'm going to get rid of the 6x first by subtracting, but these are not like terms. My y is still negative, so I'm just going to write the x first and the y and the 14 second, so that I can keep them separate, because they are not like terms. Then, just like the problem to the left, I'm going to divide by negative 2, and it is going to flip my inequality. Negative divided by negative gives me 3x minus 7. Remember, if it's going too fast, you can slow it down by playing it at 0.75 speed, or you can just come talk to me. So this is just generally how you're going to solve. So let's look at what that looks like if we have an actual problem. Where are we at? So if I have something like this, and I got to get the y by itself, think about, what would you do? Yeah, we got to do opposites. We got to do the opposite of this positive 6 here. So minus 6. I don't want to do it to the x, because I can't combine those together with adding and subtracting. So I want to make sure I subtracted the other number. Keep everything else the same. And how many x's is it? It's 1 over 1. So I could easily graph from there. Start at 4. Down 1 and right 1. I think, is it solid or dashed? It is solid. Then I think shade above or below. I want to shade below because it is less than. And that is my line. Let's look at another one. I might have something like this. 5x minus 3y is less than or equal to 12. Here, I'm going to get rid of that 5x first. Since they can't be combined, I'm going to keep them separate. Don't lose my sign. Write my x first, just out of preference, so it is still an mx plus b. And then I divide out. Make sure that when you add or subtract, you just do it once. But when you multiply or divide, you got to do that to everything. Since I divided by a negative, what do I have to remember here? Yeah, I got to flip it. And then I've got a negative divided by a negative here. But opposite signs here, so I'm going to get a negative. Then I'm going to go ahead and graph it normally. Once you get your y by itself, we're just graphing. We're going to start down 4. We're going to go up 5. And over 3. We're going to think, is it dashed or solid? Okay, it's solid. And then we're going to think, are we going to shade above or below? So since it is opening at the y, we are just going to shade above, because that is greater than. So this is how you solve when you want to graph your single line inequalities. If you need to see more examples, please come find me.